Hey guys, so for this video, I want to talk about why Benjyfishy is one of the most consistent players in the world. Unless you live under a rock, you should know who Benjyfishy is and how dominant he's been recently. The kid placed second in the squad FNCS finals, top 3 in 2 different platform cash cups, won the week 3 contender cash cup, and then in the same day that following week, came top 4 in both EU and NA. Yes, you heard that right. On literally 90 ping, he came in 4th on the NA East server. That kind of consistency and dominance is unheard of outside of Unknown Army, who we looked at last week. The even crazier thing though is that unlike Unknown, Benjy does not go full W key mode. He mainly plays for placements and endgame. So in order to learn how to be a more successful and well-rounded player, let's dive into the 8 things that makes Benjy so consistent. The first isn't really a trait or an attribute, but rather how well he plays out the early game. As you guys probably know, the start of a match is easily the hardest part to get through. There's so much RNG with loot and opponents that even top tier pros have trouble making it to the mid game. Benjyfishy, however, is one of the few who does not. In almost all of the games I analyzed, he was able to make it out of Lazy Lake with numerous kills and stacked loot. Part of the reason why is his drop. Benjy always aims for the same chest on top of the same house at the northeast side of Lazy. Additionally, he's always the first one there and follows the same exact loot path. He'll open up all the chests inside, drop down to the garage, and then rotate to the house across the street. What this does is it effectively negates RNG by reducing how much variation Benjy experiences after he drops. So whether you're playing in a tournament or just going for a win, remember that the best way to diminish early game randomness is to mimic the same successful start you had every single time. The second thing that makes Benjy so consistent is his patience. By this, I basically mean not rushing fights, not forcing plays, and most importantly, aiming to make the late game. Let's take a look at this engagement Benjy gets into. After checking who's around him and lining up his shot, he lasers the guy for 120 damage. He then immediately decides to push as they're already in zone, nobody is nearby, and Benjy knows he has a huge shield advantage. We see him do the right thing by constantly spraying the guy's wall and making sure he cannot heal back up. Then, following some nice box fighting, Benjy hits him for 27 twice, meaning the dude is at 26 total health. All Benjy needs to do is go for the same edit peek he just did, and the other guy is dead for sure. But instead, Benjy actually lets the guy escape out of the box he had him trapped inside and chooses to heal up. So even though he still had the upper hand, he wanted to play it safe and be patient. Evidently, it paid off, as by the time the other guy boxes up again, Benjy is already back on him with 50 more shield and secures the kill. The third reason Benjy is so darn consistent is something we just saw in that last clip: his build and box fighting skills. Everything from his editing to his close range aim and crosshair placement is elite. Remember though, most good players have crackhead mechanics nowadays. Just because you can edit or build fast does not mean you're automatically gonna be a good box fighter. So much of it comes down to playing angles, going for the right peaks, and outsmarting your opponent. Take for example, this early game 1v1. Benjy's inside a building, box fighting a guy, and doing everything he possibly can to make this guy uncomfortable. Then we see part of what makes Benjy so unstoppable and hard to win against. He yoinks the guy's floor and without hesitation builds a wall to his left, blocking off his opponent's only escape route. After that, the guy makes an edit, they trade some shots, and then comes the best part. Benjy pickaxes the floor once to bait out the edit, his opponent takes the bait, and Benjy finishes him off while also protecting himself by resetting the wall. So what sets Benjy apart is not how great his mechanics are, but instead how he chooses to utilize them in fights. Next, the fourth reason behind Benjy's consistency is his confidence. You've probably seen many clips where Benjy dumps on someone or wins a game and says that he's the best player in the world. He'll say that he's so good at Fortnite and that nobody else can beat him. Whether or not that's true is up for debate, but that's not what matters. What matters is that he believes it and that he has self-assurance in his own abilities. I feel like this is something a ton of you guys struggle with in arena or tournament matches. You'll go up against someone good, and once they build over you or do some damage on you, you basically shut down. What you gotta realize about Fortnite is that anyone can win the fight. Just because you're up against someone good who has a better loadout or more shield does not mean you can't win the fight. Benjy knows this, and it's why he's always so confident. Even when he makes a mistake or a misplay, he still believes in himself and understands that one play does not define him, because the moment it does and it starts to affect him inside is the moment that he's lost the fight before it's even begun. Halfway done, and the fifth thing that makes Benjy so consistent are his rotations. Now, before you meme on him for pickaxe swinging, yes, it's something he does, and yes, it is a legitimate strategy. Pickaxe swinging is something competitive players do to signal that they don't want to fight and that they're just trying to rotate to zone. It usually happens in the mid game, when zone is really far away, or when there's just way too many people on one side of the circle. Do I recommend doing this? Yes, but I don't think it's something you should be relying on. Instead, you should be like Benjy when he's not making in-game truces. That's when he's rotating early, deciding between center circle or edge zone, and being aware of everything going on around him. If I'm gonna be honest, it's pretty hard to give advice regarding rotations because there's so many factors that go into them, and because each rotate you make will be different. Let me know down below if you want a full video on rotations, but as long as you're not rotating too late and you're actually thinking about where to rotate to, it really shouldn't be as hard as you think. The sixth reason for Benjy's consistency is his decision making, and to be more specific, when he decides to take fights and when he decides to go for high ground. The reason I bring up these two examples is because they are decisions Benjy is constantly making the right calls on. For fighting, we saw it a little bit earlier, but Benjy is not afraid to push someone when he feels the time calls for it. Usually it's after he gets someone low, or he sees they're running out of mats, or even when he sees someone who doesn't look like that strong of a player. On the flip side, he also knows when to let other players rotate and when to avoid 50-50s that could cost him the game. For taking high ground, it's very much the same, with Benjy's awareness being the main facilitator. In this endgame clip, Benjy is really far back in zone, surviving solely off of fish. He only has a bit more than 300 materials total, but still makes the decision to build up for height. Why? Mainly because he saw his opponent was not building at all. This signaled to Benjy that the other guy was out of mats and that he had a free shot to build up above him. As per usual, Benjy was correct and brought home the win in a scenario he probably shouldn't have. The second to last thing that makes Benjy so consistent is that he does not tilt. Tilting refers to when you get frustrated, usually from something that you feel wasn't your fault or that was out of your control. If you've ever played competitive Fortnite, then you probably know what I'm talking about and how tilting it can be. Maybe your build never placed, or your edit didn't go through and you died because of it. Most people, including myself, would let that affect our mentals and start playing worse because of it. Not Benjy though. Something totally ridiculous could happen to Benjy and he'd still be ready to go for the next game. That does not mean he doesn't rage or call Fortnite garbage. It's actually the opposite. The reason Benjy does not tilt is because he does rage and he does let out his frustration. He doesn't sit there and try to bottle up his anger or suppress it like most people would tell you to do. This is why Olympic athletes train to the point where a heightened sense of adrenaline and pain does not affect them. Performing in esports is no different in that regard. So just like Benjy, stop trying not to tilt and let it happen without affecting your gameplay. The final thing I want to talk about is Benjy's clutch factor. The pure amount of endgame clutches Benjy has pulled off in solos and squads is absurd. And when you think about it, it's why he's always placing so highly in these tournaments. Stepping up in big moments is what separates coming in second and third a bunch of times from coming in first and winning the tournament or placing in the money. The only bad part for the majority of us is that becoming clutch is really not something that can be taught. It requires a ton of experience, embracing the spotlight, not being nervous, and sometimes a tidbit of luck. So while everything else you can go out and grind, obtaining that clutch factor will not be as easy. Just realize though, that does not mean it's impossible as long as you put the work in. Overall guys, those are 8 reasons why Benjyfishy is so consistent. If you guys learned something new or you found the video useful, then do be sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and to turn on post notifications. Shout out to everyone using code Jerian. Remember to send pictures of you using my code to my Twitter or Instagram. Otherwise, that's it from me, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.